Hello, and welcome to the first actual story I will read. Today, this evening, tonight, etc., we will be reading Nadine Gordimer, Once Upon a Time. Now, I haven't actually read this one. There are some that I have read in this book, but this one I haven't. So this will be, well, interesting for both of us. Someone has written to ask me to contribute to an anthology of stories for children. I reply that I don't write children's stories, and he writes back that at a recent congress/book fair/seminar, a certain novelist said, "Every writer ought to write at least one story for children." I think of sending a postcard saying, "I don't accept that I ought to write anything." And then last night I woke up, or rather, was awakened without knowing what had aroused me. A voice in the echo chamber of the subconscious? A sound. A creaking of the kind made by the weight carried by one foot after another along a wooden floor. I listened. I felt the apertures of my ears distend with concentration. Again, the creaking. I was waiting for it, waiting to hear if it indicated that feet were moving from room to room, coming up the passage, to my door. I have no burglar bars, no gun under the pillow, but I have the same fears as people who do take these precautions, and my window panes are thin as rime, could shatter like a wine glass. A woman was murdered. How do they put it? In broad daylight, in a house 2 blocks away last year, and the fierce dogs who guarded an old widower and his collection of antique clocks were strangled before he was knifed by a casual labourer that he had dismissed without pay. I was staring at the door, making it out in my mind rather than seeing it in the dark. I lay quite still, a victim already. The arrhythmia of my heart was fleeing, knocking this way and that against its body cage. How finely tuned the senses are, just out of rest, sleep. I could never listen intently as that in the distractions of the day. I was reading every faintest sound, identifying and classifying its possible threat. But I learned that I was to be neither threatened nor spared. There was no human weight pressing on the boards. The creaking was a buckling, an epicenter of stress. I was in it. The house that surrounds me while I slept is built on an undermined ground. Far beneath my bed, the floor, the house's foundations, the stopes and passages of gold mines have hollowed the rock, and when some face trembles, detaches and falls 3,000 feet below, the whole house shifts slightly, bringing uneasy strain to the balance and counterbalance of brick, cement, wood, and glass that hold it as a structure around me. The misbeats of my heart trailed off like the last muffled flourishes on one of the wooden xylophones made by Chopi and Tsonga, migrant miners who might have been down there, under me in the earth at that moment. The stope where the fall was could have been disused, dripping water from its ruptured veins, or men might now be interred there in the most profound of tombs. I couldn't find a position in which my mind would let go of my body, release me to sleep once again. So I began to tell myself a story, a bedtime story. In a house in a suburb in a city, there were a man and his wife who loved each other very much and were living happily ever after. They had a little boy, and they loved him very much. They had a cat and a dog that the little boy loved very much. They had a car and a caravan trailer for holidays, and a swimming pool which was fenced so that the little boy and his playmates could not fall in and drown. They had a housemaid who was absolutely trustworthy, and an itinerant gardener who was highly recommended by the neighbors. For when they began to live happily ever after, they were warned, by that wise old witch, the husband's mother, not to take on anyone off the street. They were inscribed in a medical benefit society. Their pet dog was licensed. They were insured against fire, flood damage, and theft, and subscribed to local neighborhood watch, which supplied them with a plaque for their gates lettered "You have been warned" over the silhouette of a would-be intruder. He was masked. It could not be said if he was black or white, and therefore proved the property owner was not racist. It was not possible to insure the house, the swimming pool, or the car against riot damage. There were riots, but these were outside the city, where people of another color were quartered. These people were not allowed into the suburb, except as reliable housemaids and gardeners, so there was nothing to fear, the husband told the wife. Yet she was afraid that some day such people might come up to the street and tear off the plaque "You have been warned," and open the gates and stream in. "Nonsense, my dear," said the husband. "There are police and soldiers and tear gas and guns to keep them away." But to please her, for he loved her very much, and buses were being burned, cars stoned, and school children shot by the police in those quarters out of sight and hearing of the suburb, he had electronically controlled gates fitted. Anyone who pulled off the sign "You have been warned" and tried to open the gates would have to announce his intentions by pressing a button and speaking into a receiver relayed to the house. The little boy was fascinated by the device, and used it as a walkie-talkie in cops and robbers play with his small friends. The riots were suppressed, but there were many burglaries in the suburb, and somebody's trusted housemaid was tied up and shut in a cupboard by thieves while she was in charge of her employer's house. The trusted housemaid of the man and wife and little boy was so upset by this misfortune befalling a friend left, as she herself often was, with responsibility for the possessions of the man, his wife, and the little boy, that she implored her employers to have burglar bars attached to the doors and windows of the house, and an alarm system installed. The wife said, "She is right. Let us take heed of her advice." So from every window and door in the house, where they were living happily ever after, they now saw the trees and sky through bars. And when the little boy's pet cat tried to climb in through the fanlight to keep him company in his little bed at night, as it had customarily done, it set off the alarm, keening through the house. The alarm was often answered, it seemed, by other burglar alarms in other houses that had been triggered by pet cats or nibbling mice. The alarms called to one another across the gardens in shrills and bleats and wails that everyone soon became accustomed to, so that the din roused the inhabitants of the suburb no more than the croak of frogs and musical grating of cicada legs. Under cover of the electronic harpies, discourse intruders sawed the iron bars and broke into homes, taking away hi-fi equipment, television sets, cassette players, cameras and radios, jewelry and clothing, and sometimes were hungry enough to devour everything in the refrigerator, or paused audaciously to drink the whiskey in the cabinets or patio bars. Insurance companies paid no compensation for single malt, a loss made keener by the property owner's knowledge that the thieves wouldn't even have been able to appreciate what it was they were drinking.